Back again with another show on aviation and anything that comes out of that. Paul Brennan here in Wellington and
Martin Noakes also in Wellington.
And we are showing at the moment, Martin, a clip shot at Wellington of one of the new A320 COs, which is the current engine option with the nice Koru, black tail. There we go. And we're playing this because, wow, big story. We touched on this last program when we were talking about the A321, and I think someone said, well, shouldn't we have those? And it was sort of like a watch this space in a hopeful way, but hey, here we are.
Yeah, 2 weeks later.
And guess what?
It's all on.
They've ordered $1.6 billion worth of Airbus aircraft, 13 Airbus A320 Neos, and also at least 3 A321 Neos.
Of which, at least 3 will be A321s.
So what are they going to use those for?
Yeah, well, they're all to replace the local overseas fleet, so that'll be to the islands in Australia.
Yeah.
And they've ordered one extra domestic, I believe. Isn't that how the orders panned out?
Yeah, that's A320 for domestic, though, isn't it? Not A321.
Yeah, an A320 for the regular domestic service, and a mixture of A320s and A321s to replace the regional fleet.
Yeah, so they're rolling over the older ones, obviously, because they're, coming up about 10 years old now. They're also putting business seats, aren't they, in the A321? So what can we read into that? Because they took business seats out of Tasman flying a long time ago.
So I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is they will then be the only airline apart from Emirates offering regular business class seats on the Trans-Tasman, which has got to be useful for something. But I'm wondering whether or not it's got something to do with the Singapore Airlines tie-up. So if you order a Singapore Airlines business class ticket from Auckland to Singapore via Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, you'd get on a A321 in Auckland with business class, fly on to Brisbane, do your business, whatever, get on the Singapore Airlines business class for the rest of your journey.
Otherwise you can't really sell it as a business seat all the way.
No, you can't at the moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got no evidence for that. It just seems to me a very good tie-in considering that they're getting quite close with Singapore Airlines.
And 3, and you said, or alluded to maybe more, but 3 is the minimum you need for a service, isn't it? They say normally?
It really is the minimum, and I think that's more of a placeholding order than it is a true reflection of how many they intend to get. They don't have to firm up the actual mix for a while.
Right.
So they've got at least 3 on the way, and they've got a couple of months, maybe a year or so, to decide whether they want more of them.
And these are the Neos, the new engine option, and they've got a slightly different look from the current ones. Those engines are bigger.
Yep.
The fans are wider, aren't they?
Yeah, and I'm guessing they'll go with the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan on that plane.
Yeah, now, just speaking of that, there has been a bit of news in the past week of there being a failure of the geared turbofan on the Bombardier aircraft.
Yeah.
And everyone was worried that if that was the gearbox, there'd be a problem. Was it?
No, it was the low-pressure turbine, so the turbine at the back of the engine, which, however, does go on to drive the shaft, which drives the gearbox, which drives the fan. So,
yeah.
But, the Rolls-Royce engine on the 787 failed during testing, so, these things happen.
The thing is, though, if it's a gearbox issue, it's a real showstopper, isn't it?
Yes, that would make people very nervous, but, I mean, they've been testing that gearbox apparently for 10 years now, or the design of that gearbox. They have had to do some redesigns during that time, and it doesn't seem to be the problem at this time.
Right. So with these new Airbus on the way for Air New Zealand, that's going to be the 73 gone pretty soon, forever. And also they've set a final date for the 747-400 final service. It seems to be September 10th. San Francisco back to Auckland is the final 747 service that Air New Zealand will operate, and then that'll be 35 years of that gone.
That'll be it. Yeah, and then not long after that, apparently the 767s will be leaving.
Nothing ever stops. And the 787-9, the one in the black for Air New Zealand, we had some footage of it in our last YouTube version, and also we were chatting about that. That's since flown, so that's in the air now.
Yep.
And that's due end of June, early July. So that's all getting close.
3 or 4 weeks.
So I think we like the sound of that Airbus order, don't we?
Yes, I mean, we've discussed the A321 and often wondered why they didn't have it on Trans-Tasman, and there you are, it's on its way.
And aren't they saying, Air New Zealand, that compared to the current A320s, which they'll roll over, the A321, the Neo, is actually cheaper to operate than the current A320 that they have in service at the moment, with, up to 40...
The A321
possibly
is
up to
cheaper,
40 extra seats.
Yeah, and potentially a business class. And it also is going to be quite interesting because apparently Virgin Australia are up to order a whole bunch of new aircraft pretty soon. And given that most of the major shareholders, well, New Zealand and Singapore Airlines are
Delta? Are they in there at all? No, Etihad, isn't it?
Etihad, yeah. Now, Etihad doesn't have much of a short-haul fleet.
They've got A321s for their short-haul.
Air New Zealand is completely A320. Singapore is completely A320 family on their short-haul fleet. So I wonder what that'll do for Virgin Australia.
That could be like one of those EasyJet opportunities where because the Virgin fleet's quite big, isn't it?
Mm.
Wow.
It's over 100 planes.
So they'll be eyeing that up, Airbus.
Definitely.
And again, probably A321s would be great coast-to-coast machines in Australia, wouldn't
Well,
they?
if the savings are as big as people are saying they are, and the order book seems to reflect that Boeing MAX is really not doing that well against the Neo.
Yeah.
Of course, money talks, and depending on the discount you get and the actual savings, but when airlines like, and we're going to mention this, when airlines like Delta start ordering these planes, wow.
They're going against sort of cultural history.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that because, again, that's another A321 order, but that's for the current model. So they'll be the run-outs at the end of the line probably.
Yeah.
So, again, indicating possibly quite a good price.
It's been a remarkable change around at Delta because it looks like Delta, the talk is that they might be the launch customer for the A330 Neo.
Wow. Okay, who'd have thought?
Who would have thunk, eh?
Yeah, well, that's why it's a good idea for Airbus to hurry up and complete that assembly facility in the US.
In Alabama.
That will get over all those, parochial pushback.
And apparently
arguments.
the announcement for the A330 Neo is meant to come at the Farnborough show.
Oh, okay.
Which is also in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Oh, great.
So we'll go.
Farnborough's always good.
Yeah.
We also last program talked about Qantas laying off a whole lot of pilots. I see they've firmed that up now, 223 to go by the end of June. That's this month. That's way quicker than I think we thought at the time.
Well, initially they announced I think it was going to be 100.
Yeah, 223 now.
Doubled that.
So that must mean they're going to retire some aircraft soon as well.
The 74s and the 76s will be going, yeah.
There'll be a few pilots around looking for jobs.
Quite happy early retired pilots.
You go out and find a job somewhere else, you could do quite well.
We'll probably go fly for Emirates.
Yeah. You'd have to retrain though, wouldn't you?
There was a very interesting, or I thought quite a funny picture of Tim Clark, the head of Emirates, shaking the hand of Alan Joyce, and the caption was, Alan handing over half of their business to Emirates for free.
Yes, we've talked about that too. Alan Joyce may come to regret doing that, but maybe it was the only option available at the time.
Well, it does give them a lot of breathing room to downsize, and maybe that was part of the deal.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing with Tim Clark, there were some rumours in the press earlier this week that Emirates and Boeing were talking about the 747-8i.
Right.
And then 2 days later, Tim Clark comes on and shuts that down real quick, saying, there's no plane can do for us what the A380 does. We're not interested in 747s.
It's a real problem because unless that freight market comes back, it's going to wither on the vine and die.
Well, they might sell up to 8 to the US government.
Yeah, because there'll be new Air Force One, won't there?
3 Air Force Ones and up to 5 of those nuclear-hardened flying command centres.
Oh, they're going to replace those?
They're thinking of replacing those.
Yeah, because they're 200 still at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
The E4s,
I think that's what they're called, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a chance they might get those, but...
The Doomsday plane.
And of course, as you were saying earlier, Iran might buy a whole bunch.
Yeah, we're talking about that. The sanctions could be coming off in relation to their nuclear ambitions, and they're talking about up to initially 100 aircraft, need for 100, but up to 400. They sort of want to get as big, it seems, as carriers like Emirates or Etihad or Qatar. Again, I guess taking advantage of that part of the world.
Well, they're going to try and do it Turkey, because Turkey's trying to do the same thing as well, Turkish Airlines.
So, Boeing and Airbus, great opportunity here. Those two companies will be wanting this whole thing to be settled as soon as possible, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 747-8i. That was one of the aircraft types that the Iranian guy I was reading in the story was talking about. So, I mean, what would that be? A sort of like a payoff back to the Americans for... you sign this deal, Iran, and suddenly, you can get a good deal on these aircraft.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they
get your airline moving again.
They get a good deal real quick.
Yeah. So watch that space.
Hmm.
And I see those 787s keep rolling out this week out in Thai colours, looking pretty good.
That looks very nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, they've delivered quite a few now.
Oh, yeah, they're getting up there. But they're nowhere near the 10 a month they said they were going to produce. It's more like 6.
Right.
And it looks like delivery figures are going to be down this year, which is one of the things that the head of Airbus brought up. They were discussing how effective the A330 Neo would be against a 787.
Yeah.
And he says, of course, the A330 would be cheaper because it's not a development project, but he doesn't think that Boeing is making them as cheaply as they thought they would be able to. And it's
Right.
not because there's any problem with it or anything. It's just not as cheap as they anticipated.
Too ambitious at the time, wasn't it?
Possibly.
You can just see how those things happen. The whole thing starts to generate its own weather after a while.
Yeah.
Everyone's so relentlessly positive. The claims made are always at the absolute positive end of what's doable.
Yeah.
And you get this sort of frenzy of promises, and it gets its own sort of momentum, and before you know it, you're way over promising and potentially under delivering, and they can get you into a real problem area.
Well, the maths these guys have done, and also some independent analysts have had a go at it. An A330neo 300 on routes of up to 4,000 miles, so sort of interregional, Southeast Asia, all that type of thing, will come within 2% of the 787.
That's just on performance, is it?
Yeah. So they reckon if they can sell it for $15 million cheaper
Over the lifetime, it's the same, isn't it?
It's actually, it's a better deal. And if you're already running a whole lot of A330s and you know how to fix aluminium airframes and you've got all the check procedures and everything in place, it's done. It's the same cost.
Here's a question.
For an old plane.
You wonder, because another one of the promises of the 787 was that ramp rash would be easily cured, and that sort of maintenance would be a lot easier than the metal planes. Has that turned out to be the case? Is there any talk about that?
No one said for sure, but again, the analysts are saying it appears not to be the case.
Right.
It's no easier or cheaper to repair than anything else.
Yeah.
And there have been little knocks and scuffs and all this type of thing.
Just
and it's
different.
That's it. It's just different.
Yeah. Well, you're out with the Bondi.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Bit of sandpaper.
Yeah, sand it down.
Spray coat. 500 mile an hour tape.
Yeah.
And that should last for a week.
Hold it for a while.
Yeah, and I see they're up to 150 A380s now. Emirates just got their latest one, and it's number 150. So
wow,
been a few come off the line.
Interesting. Again, we often talk about Emirates, but it seems to be the biggest game in town.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Their policy is to cram as many people in the 777s as possible.
Yeah.
And to give people space in the A380. They're not going to go to full capacity on the A380 because they say their current product offering on the A380 is so good, it's a magnet plane. And we said that last program, but it got confirmed again this week that they're going to not go 11 abreast. They're going to stay 10 abreast. And so you'll always get the same room in an A380 at 10 abreast as you'd get in a 9 abreast 777.
Right.
And most 777s are now at 10 abreast. And I must admit, I've flown in the back of a 777 at 10 abreast. It ain't great.
No.
It's pretty tight. Nothing to do with the plane. It's just how they operate them.
Yes, and I see their latest A380 is number 49 in their fleet now.
Wow.
So almost 50.
So it's like one a week.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, they must have to send crews off every week to pick up a new one.
Gee.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, another one. So what?
It's amazing.
They probably get them in service after about a day or two now. They'll be so practiced at it.
Yeah.
The International Air Transport Association have been having their big get-together in Doha. See, that part of the world. It's where it's at, isn't it? And they're saying that one of the big announcements out of the get-together is the call for real-time safety tracking of aircraft around the globe, obviously in the wake of MH370. So look out for those systems to become pretty well standard kit.
Yeah, just do it.
In aircraft that fly, particular
the next thing will be remote autopilot override.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Though, how much bandwidth, what sort of link do you need to be able to ensure that is doable?
Well, if you can pick up the news, which a lot of airlines are offering now, I don't think managing the autopilot would be a problem.
But, if you're going to fly it...
you wouldn't fly it like real-time remotely.
You'd use the autopilot to do it.
Yeah, but you'd say, fly here, do this, descend to this height, do that speed.
You just program the flight management computer remotely, basically. Because the thing will auto-land and everything, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that should be able to be done. That's crazy. That could save lives.
Could save lives, especially when the pilot locks himself out the cockpit by mistake or falls asleep.
Yeah, or someone goes rogue.
But, with the increased automation in cockpits causing problems, maybe the fact that the pilot knows that someone could take charge from somewhere else, they would sleep a lot more. I might as well have a nap. It doesn't really mean anything.
Or maybe you can do that. Maybe you can, a bit of remote monitoring, and, if anything happens, you can wake him up.
Yeah. Well, if one of the engines falls off, that'll probably wake you up.
Well, that'll be what happens. If it's happening with cars, and automatic cars are going to be big, and possibly solve the whole road safety question, because not having any collisions at all is probably better than having collisions and trying to survive them, is always going to be better for safety. So you can see that coming to aviation, can't you?
Well, it's easier with aviation because most of them, the systems are actually pretty much in place.
We could have this great thing for enthusiasts where you at home you can sort of take over an aircraft or something. You know? You'd be on the emergency list.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, call him.
We've got a problem.
Yeah.
Paul, you want to have a crack at landing
this one?
He's got the
software. He's got a great joystick.
Yeah, but really slow internet, so it's going to be real.
Dial up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to decide your moves in advance.
Well in advance.
Airlines will have to put this technology on board because people are so well informed about MH370. You know, people are amazed that you can't instantly track something.
Did you see that fire at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow?
There was an Aeroflot plane that caught fire. Was it being stored or was parked? Wasn't it? It was
parked.
It was a Russian
IL-96.
300.
Yeah, it's one way of getting rid of them, though, eh?
Yeah, well, I think they've been withdrawn from service and they probably were never going to fly again.
So there you go, set fire to it. Or
well, they wouldn't do that, would they?
No.
Yeah, something shorted out somewhere, and
yeah, but quite spectacularly.
Just shows you once, what is it, the insulation or the plastic fittings in the cabin, they've probably got moulded plastic fittings from the early 90s, so they'll be really flammable.
Great looking plane.
Yeah, a bit sad though.
Jeez, burnt out and gone.
Yeah, I won't say we should have one of those, which I always seem to say about aircraft types, because it's pretty well had its day. I think Qantas still fly them.
Yes, they do.
And there's a few freighters around too.
They tried real hard to sell an updated version, a lengthened version with Western engines and Western avionics, the 400T.
400, yeah, and it was impressive size.
Very impressive, but it didn't go anywhere. I mean, freighters aren't selling. Look at Boeing.
There are two main airports in Moscow, isn't there?
Domodedovo and Sheremetyevo.
Yeah, the one you've just mentioned.
Sounds like a tennis player, doesn't it?
Yeah, she just won.
Yeah.
That represents another passing of an era.
Yep.
I mean, there are still Russian types being made, but few and far between, and that's really the last great airliner they made.
Yeah,
really.
they've got that Sukhoi Superjet. They've got the Antonov, the 74.
The one that looks like a 146.
Yeah, that's a very nice looking plane.
It is, yeah.
And there's the MS-21, the Irkut. That's apparently going to come online soon. So the way the Russians have done it, you've got Sukhoi building the Superjet, which goes up to 125, 130 people.
Right.
Then from 155 to 230, they're introducing another plane. I think it's called the MS-21, but they're just about to rename it to the Yak 242 or
Is that a turboprop?
No. It's an
sorry.
A320 to A321 class.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So when do they start on that?
Oh, the prototype's being built now, and it looks like they've sold 276 of them.
Well, that's not bad.
No, not bad at all. And
but who to? That's the other question.
A lot of Eastern airlines, and the main market they see is to replace Tupolev 154s and that type of thing.
Yeah, well, there are hundreds of them. All right, so that's a fair number to get going with. No wonder they're building that. That's enough to launch a program on, I would have thought.
It's the MS-21, which in Russian, Cyrillic, looks like the MC-21. So a bit confusing.
Yeah. I was actually watching on CNN, they've got that series Cold War on at the moment. And it's got some fantastic footage in it. They've really mined all the footage reservoirs around the world. One of them was Khrushchev flying in the Tu-114,
I think it was.
Looking out the window with those contra-rotating props.
Wow, that's a fantastic looking plane.
And the cabin inside, luxurious, but looking like a railway carriage, you know?
And Japanese Airlines operated that flight together with Aeroflot, so you could go Tokyo, Europe via Moscow.
Because they had mega distance, mega range.
And one half of the plane was painted JAL and the other half was painted in Aeroflot colours.
We'll see if we can find a picture of that to put on our YouTube version for those watching YouTube.
When they flew it to I think it was the Paris Air Show, they had to fly the air stairs out there separately because the plane was so high off the ground, none of the local air stairs fitted.
I can imagine, yeah.
Basically designed to carry high-ranking Soviet officials around the empire.
Just like the Tu-144. That was a supersonic cargo plane.
Amazing, wasn't it?
In the end. I love watching that old footage.
I see that Tupolev 114 was retired in 1991.
Really?
Apparently.
They were still flying them up till then?
Yeah. Soviet Air Force must have had a couple.
Right, okay. Yeah, like VIP transports or something. Well, I guess it's the same as flying the Bear, isn't it? It's probably got the same cockpit, basically.
The Indians fly the Bear.
Yeah, they do.
Maritime patrol.
Yeah. Very long patrols.
Jeez,
very long. Anyway. Okay, so now we get to a bit of space before we go to the aircraft of the day. In fact, before space, we talked about the A300 last week, right? It was the 40th anniversary of it going into service. And I mentioned that the closest operators to this part of the world would have been TAA, which was correct. But I overlooked, and thank you to one of our commenters on the YouTube channel reminding us that Qantas Airlines, which was a short-lived carrier, in the late 80s, early 90s, it would have been. Early 90s, they had 4 A300 600s.
Okay.
That's why it failed, basically, because they had too much capacity.
Oh, too big a plane.
Too big a plane. They look quite tidy. In fact, we'll throw up a picture now. So thank you for pointing that out.
China Eastern have just retired their last couple of A300-605s.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been operating them since the 80s.
That's incredible, isn't it?
A300 family since the 80s.
Yeah. And space, we talked a few weeks ago about SpaceX's rocket that lands itself next to the launch pad. I see now they have their capsule that can carry people ready to go.
Yeah, I think it's an 8-seater.
8-seater?
It's called the Dragon 2, I believe.
That will go to the space station initially, will it?
Well, apparently, according to Elon Musk, it might take him to Mars. And they're going to fly that apparently this year as well. And that's also interesting because that also lands on the end of a rocket plume.
What does this mean for NASA? I've been wondering.
Yeah.
You know,
well, it's shown them up, hasn't it?
Well, they're getting pushed out of the game.
Because NASA, in conjunction with the space industrial complex, hasn't been that effective over the last year. Well, I mean, they've been very effective in as much as they were keeping a very difficult-to-fly product flying, which was the space shuttle, which was enormously resource-intensive.
Yeah, but you know why they carried on with that for so long? It comes down to why Americans still like yokes and not side sticks. They wanted something they could fly like a damn airplane, man.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not actually doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the really expensive way of doing it.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, that this guy, Elon Musk, is his background engineering?
I think his background's making tons of money, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's his specialty.
Because what happens is when you get the engineers together making something, everything becomes incremental, slow steps. There's no out of the box, is there? You get some guy like him, like a what-if guy.
Yeah.
And then it's the engineers that take that and turn it into something.
And
That's always the best way to do it.
Yeah, he's given his engineers free rein.
Yeah, go do it.
Go out there, hit it out the park, see what you can do. You know, if the rocket's reusable, if the capsule's reusable, I mean, that's brilliant. It doesn't have to have wings to be effective.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so watch that space, because once those two bits of the package go together, the manned capsule and the reusable rocket, suddenly you've got, well, basically an elevator into space.
Yeah, because the capsule will come down, they'll take off the remnants of the heat shield, bolt a new heat shield on, strap it to the top of another rocket.
Yeah, which parks itself after it's
pretty much,
business,
and off she goes again.
Yeah.
I think they're talking of a 4 to 5 week turnaround initially.
Yeah. All right, our aircraft of the day. We're going back to the 1940s, and I've always had an eye for this aircraft. It's classic British, of course. Avro, one of the big deals in the business back then. Based on the Lancaster, it is.
The Avro York.
It's a fine-looking, handsome plane, I reckon.
Yeah, it's basically a big boxy fuselage stuck to Lancaster wings, isn't it? With a 3-plane tail, or whatever it's called.
What it does, though, is it shows you how good the Lancaster layout actually was.
Yeah.
The Merlins, the high wing, the 3 tails. On a bomber, we all know about that. But on a transport plane, it could lift 10 tons.
Yep.
Could fly, about 3,000 miles.
Yep.
Had a big part in the Berlin airlift. They took even coal in this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it was impressive performance.
And, you know, it must have been very cheap to build because they must have had thousands of sets of wings in production when they called the war off. So that would have been relatively easy.
Yeah. Tail dragger, of course.
Well, the British, they stuck with that for quite a long time, didn't they?
It's the Lancaster, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the wheels as well, the main undercarriage, Lancaster undercarriage as well. There's still a few around in museums. I've never seen one in the flesh. I'd like to go and have a look at one.
Well, they flew them for 20 years, didn't they? After the war.
That would have been really quite an enjoyable era to fly in, wouldn't it? It'd all be hands-on.
The end of the piston era did produce some very good-looking airplanes, didn't they?
Yeah.
You know, the other one we spoke about, the Airspeed Ambassador, you know, the Constellation, even the big DC-7s and that, they were great-looking planes.
Yeah, so operated by the Royal Air Force, BOAC, British South American Airways and Skyways Limited. Operators of the Avro
They must have been
York.
so maintenance intensive, though.
Yeah, think about it.
You know, just those engines, you know, and access must have been a nightmare, and changing spark plugs all the time and filters and, nightmare. All with very explosive fuel.
But they're all used to it from doing it on Lancasters all through the war. So there's plenty of
you had
knowledge
lots of mechanics with the requisite knowledge.
Last types were with Skyways and Dan Air, retired in 1964, so 1 year after I was born.
Our parents would have seen these, if they were in the UK at the time, that would have been quite a regular occurrence to seeing these things coming in, eh?
One of the prototypes was custom built as the personal transport and flying conference room for the Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
Oh.
Had a special pressurised egg in it.
Oh, yes, I've seen a picture of that.
VIP passengers could be carried without having to use an oxygen mask.
Well, you can't smoke a cigar with an oxygen mask, can you?
No. Yeah.
And you can't drink.
That would have made him a bit grumpy.
Yeah, you get in the pod with a couple of bottles of port, Scotch champagne, and a box of cigars.
Also, another York was fitted out as the flying office for the use of the Viceroy of India.
Wow, if you
Lord Mountbatten.
If you can't have your own airplane, what's the point of being a viceroy?
So basically, it was probably one of the first high-end personal VIP aircraft.
Executive transport.
Yeah. South African leader Jan Smuts used a York as his personal transport.
Oh, again, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, they probably cost as much as £4,700, 12 shillings and sixpence after the war. So,
yeah.
There wouldn't have been a big hit to the budget.
They had a paratroop version, and I guess as close as it got to this part of the world would have been, I see, Australia. The Governor-General flew around in one.
Well, not to be outdone by Lord Louis Mountbatten in India and the rest of them, I suppose he thought I'd better get myself one as well.
It's like the chauffeur-driven limo of the sky.
Yeah.
From that era.
I think, as an aviation enthusiast, they should still make the Governor-Generals fly around in a York.
In a York?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would really be impressive.
Yeah.
You'd be interested to know that South African Airways, SAA, also operated Yorks back in the day.
Back in the day.
Really a Commonwealth sort of machine, right? Performance isn't too bad. Maximum speed just on 300 miles an hour. Range is 2,600 nautical miles, 23,000 foot service ceiling. It grinds up at 820 feet a minute climb rate. 4 Merlins.
They must have been real cheap to hang around for 20 years.
Well, I guess there was, like you say, there were so many parts.
Yeah.
Good to go for Lancasters.
Yeah.
You just build the fuselage box, and it's non-pressurised except for that eggy bit that they put in the VIP.
I think only Winston got that.
Old Winston got that, yeah. No smoking.
Yeah, the smoker's box.
Exactly. It made sense. It's just a progression on from all that stuff lying around from the war. So that's our aircraft of the day, the Avro York. And just a quick note that this program has been recorded a little bit earlier in the week because of unavailability later in the week.
Busy.
So things may have happened that we might have missed, and you're thinking, well, how come they didn't pick up on that? Well, it hasn't happened yet, as far as we're concerned. And anything that does in the meantime, we'll talk about in the next program. In the meantime, it's Paul Brennan here in Wellington and
Martin Noakes, still in Wellington.
See you around.
Cheers.